Hey everyone, I wanted to check in with you. There's been a little bit more clarity as to how things are going to be going forward with grading. And I also wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at the student tracker with you. I'm very sorry I didn't do a better job explaining this. So we're going to take just a few minutes to look at a couple of different things that I think will clarify what we're doing going forward. So under announcements, I posted two things earlier in the week, three things actually. So the first one is going to be your first summative grade. So if you think back to when we were in school, we had 20% of our grade that counted towards work completion. The other 80% counted based on the scores that you received on your summative assessments. So part of your grade is going to stay exactly the same. That's based on work completion. I will be assessing that every week. For the other portion, the 80% of your grade, what we're going to be focusing on is a learning progression. So, what that means is that you are showing that you're learning, you're showing growth in your education. And it's not necessarily going to reflect summatives that we would normally give you for the end of a unit. It's evidence through all of the formatives that we're doing that we'll be looking at. So let's quickly go through this rubric. So in order to achieve a 4, you are showing me that you have a complete progression of the learning outcomes. The learning outcomes are down here. They're basically the I can statements that we would use on the success criteria. If you haven't looked at the success criteria, I'm just going to show that to you really quickly as well. So this is something that even if we were in school, I would have given to you. And what it essentially does is shows you what you need to be able to do by the end of the unit in order to be successful. Okay, so we start with the performance indicators that we'll be focusing on, and then we go through and we take a look at what each of our goals are essentially. So we need to be able to describe a one-way flow of energy. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around here through energy in an ecosystem. So we did that when we looked at food webs and food chains, the direction that the arrow was pointing. We talked about the rule of 10%. This week that we're doing, we'll be talking about carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, water cycles. So we're still covering the same content that we would have been doing in school. We're just doing it through our virtual learning classroom. Now, because some of the integrity of summatives can't necessarily be kept intact, you can't do labs at home. I can't make the assumption that all of you have all the supplies that are necessary and things like that. So instead, what we're doing is we're turning to this way of you showing us along the way that you are meeting those components of the success criteria and that you are showing growth in your learning. So for the first virtual learning progression rubric, what I've done to make it clear what I am grading you or assessing you upon is actually through the success criteria. Whoops, where are we? Not success criteria, excuse me, student tracker. So if you take a look at this, I've color coded it. And the reason why I did that was because I did it by week. Every 2 weeks, you are going to be assessed on your learning progression. So the first learning progression, this is the rubric. If you look on Classroom, there's up on announcements a second learning progression. So this will come out in 2 weeks. So for that one, this is what you'll be assessed on. You're showing your understanding of these things. These are the graduation standards that we're covering. So back to the student tracker. I did this by week so that A, it's easier for you to stay organized, and B, you can see what I'm assessing you on the learning progression because every 2 weeks you're getting assessed. So the first assessment is over week 1 and 2. So that would be where we did our biotic, abiotic scavenger hunt. There's a slideshow that I wanted you to watch on there as well. And then for the second week, you had that longer constructed response. You had your outdoor data table, ecology digital notebook, and then there was that worksheet on biotic and abiotic factors with that graphic of the deer in the forest, and you had to describe the population, community, etc. And then your attendance questions goes in there as well. Part of the reason that I'm putting that in there is because that does count not only towards attendance, but on your work completion score. So right now I have in green will be the week that we are going into. So this will be the first week of your second learning progression grade. Until I have next week figured out, I'm not going to put that in there. But I've had a lot of questions as well about like, well, what am I supposed to be doing on the student tracker because it does have a due date. So the student tracker is a 0 or a 1 score. So you're either going to have done it or not done it. And the purpose of this, there's several. I do this in the classroom setting as well because I think it's a really good way for students to take ownership of their learning and also to see how assignments are connecting to the learning targets on the success criteria. So the first reason that I'm doing this to help you stay organized, put in your due dates, make sure that it's getting turned in on time. I know that you guys have a lot of different classes that are going on right now, and I know you probably have different due dates for every different thing. And while it might be helpful for you to have, the full week's worth of work from me, I still want to make sure that if you're feeling overwhelmed by that, because I have had several students say, I really wish that you didn't put everything on Monday. And I totally understand where you're coming from. And unfortunately, most students disagree with that. So I am going with the majority and posting it at the beginning of the week. But this is a really great tool to help you stay organized. I'm also going to post a suggested schedule of maybe ways that you can delegate your time within reasonable chunks of time to get these assignments done. But what I want you doing on here is, did you turn it in on time? That's a yes or a no. And then I want you to self-assess your grade. So I want you to take a minute and reflect and say, what do I think I deserve on this? Most assignments, let's take a peek at one that's recent. So let's see. Oh, I'm under announcements, not assignments. Where are we? Let's take a peek at this one. Okay, so when we look here, you'll notice the title is GS2, GS6. That stands for Grad Standard 2 and Grad Standard 6. So we're working on using models and constructing responses in this one, okay? And it says right here as well, your learning target is to create and interpret a diagram of a food chain and a food web. So I want you to actually take a peek when you scroll down at the rubrics and ask yourself, what score do I think I deserve? And this is also a really great way to practice knowing the difference between a 3 and a 4. So a lot of you with the data tables that we've done in the past, you did a great job. The data table was perfect. The difference between a 3 and a 4 was a table legend, and you didn't put that in there. And I know you know how to do it, and I know it only takes a couple seconds, but had you looked at the rubric, you would have known that. So I encourage you to take a peek at the rubrics, self-assess, figure out what it is that you need to do to earn that for, and then give yourself a realistic grade of what you believe you deserve. So because I did such a poor job explaining that earlier in the week, I am bumping back the student tracker due date. So I think I already did. Let's check that out. So now it's due April 12th at 11:59. I do want you to include this week in there as well, so you can copy and paste what you'll see for your second learning progression up here. No, maybe not. I think it's actually already on there. One more second. Yeah. So if you haven't already filled this out, go ahead, go back. I put a video, right? If you scroll up to announcements, how to check if your work is done on Google Classroom. It's literally a minute, and students that didn't know how to do this before, it was a game changer for them. It's such a quick way to go through and make sure that you're not missing any assignments. It will tell you if you submitted it late. It will tell you if it's waiting to be graded. It's awesome. It's a great feature. So go in there, check that out. But I want you to go back through, fill out the student tracker if you haven't already, and then continue going forward in this green portion, which will be this week that we're going into right now. Okay, so if you have any questions, reach out. I'm always on Google Meets during our scheduled time. I'm available 12 to 2. Send me an email first so I know to join. Hope you're well and have a great day.